The disruptions that we are seeing on the rail line today in Sydney actually stem from action being carried out by a different union. Is that right?
It's sort of right. There is some significant disruptions today because of a lack of action by Sydney Trains, particularly in its engineering and maintenance branch, to carry out works that should have been carried out over the past 2 weeks that unfortunately weren't. It was left to the last minute last night, and I understand that a ban of one of the combined rail unions kicked in and has caused is at least some of the cause of the effect today. So the 14% offer isn't a recent offer. That 14% has been on the table for at least 2.5 months now. The difference between what that offer was back in December and what it is today is that the government has also asked for the union and for the workers across the rail network to give up an important safety clause in the enterprise agreement. We don't know why they're asking the unions and workers to give up that really important protection that sits within our enterprise agreement. We've asked for an explanation and we haven't received one. But the 14% is across 4 years. It's not across 3 years, which is traditionally the case. And we are still significantly apart in terms of what the pay position would be that our members could accept.
Can you say more about this safety protection that you say has been removed?
Yeah, absolutely. It hasn't been removed yet. The government's asked as part of this offer to remove it. It's at clause 35A of our enterprise agreement. It contains an obligation on Sydney Trains, New South Wales Trains, and Transport for New South Wales to ensure that rail workers are involved in risk assessments when the rail entities seek to make change across the rail network. Now, we achieved that clause with the last government, the last coalition government, off the back of some of the dramas we had around the new intercity fleet. And we've used it really constructively over the past 2 and a bit years since it's been in place, which has led to safer outcomes on the rail network. So we're asking the government, we have asked the government why it wants that particular clause removed, and we still haven't heard an answer. But it is really important to note that when workers are involved in safety across the rail network, we do get better outcomes, and the removal of this clause, we fear, would lead to worse safety outcomes for people across Sydney.
And is that safety clause, is that what you were referring to when you said earlier that the new proposal lacks detail?
No, not specifically. So when I was referring to the lack of detail, traditionally at this point of an enterprise agreement negotiation, you have a draft enterprise agreement. So a document that has all of the clauses set out, all of the changes set out, when things would happen, why they would happen, how they would happen. An enterprise agreement is a serious legal document. It carries legal consequences, obligations on both parties. And at this point in the negotiation, there is no draft enterprise agreement. So the government saying it's putting an offer to all employees is a bit hollow. We have a headline wage figure that it's proposing. We have the fact that it wants to remove this important safety clause, but we don't have any other information in terms of a draft enterprise agreement that we can go out and show our members and say, this is the whole package, this is what the government wants you to vote on, and this is what we think you should do. We still don't have that level of detail.
Well, Transport Minister Jo Haylen's come out today saying that she's hopeful, this offer marks an important turning point in negotiations. Are you seeing it that way, or do you think that, there really is a long way to go before an agreement's reached?
Look, unfortunately, I think there is a long way to go. The government has moved 1%, and that 1% between its offer last July and now is at the cost of around 104 jobs from the consolidation of Sydney and New South Wales Trains. We have been asking for some time for the government to come back to the negotiating table. I think since the last proper bargaining meeting took place, it's been 42 days. In order to get to a position where we can confidently go to our members and the government can go to its employees and say, here's a deal we think you can accept, here's a deal that would get things back on track, we need to sit around that table and actually thrash out the issues rather than outsourcing the negotiations, outsourcing the operations to private law firms to run industrial strategies. We need just a bona fide discussion, come back to the table and talk through the issues, and let's get to a deal. At this stage, I think we need to be talking about a 3-year enterprise agreement. We're, of course, open to a 4-year enterprise agreement, but those figures have to increase significantly. It really comes down to sitting at the bargaining table with the government and going through the numbers. Like we've said in the past, and we still have this on the table, that we've found $650 million worth of savings and productivity improvements, which would allow the government to cost neutrally increase our wage outcomes. So we're not asking Treasury to fork out a huge sum of money in order to give our members a higher pay rise. We've found savings. We've found ways that the government could achieve a higher pay rise. Unfortunately, the government's picked a number of fights across numerous public sector workforces, being the psychiatrists and the nurses, that it is now sort of bundled all together. And I just don't think the government can properly resolve this issue because it's just picked too many fights on too many fronts at this stage. But we have the money, we have the savings, and we have the productivity improvements. Our members are willing to engage in those discussions, but that requires the government to actually sit down at the table and thrash out these issues.
And Toby Warnes, just finally, a question on behalf of Sydney and New South Wales commuters. Can we expect sort of ongoing disruption on the rail network? Will we see that continue until a satisfactory deal is reached?
Look, we hope not. The last thing we ever want to do is inconvenience commuters. But I must say that during these periods of industrial disputation, it becomes very easy for Sydney Trains and the New South Wales government to blame unions for protected industrial action when something goes wrong on the trains. Today, what we saw is a lack of action over the past 2 or 3 weeks by Sydney Trains maintenance department to actually get on and fix sections of the track. And that's why we're seeing the delays that we're seeing today. So look, we will do our part to ensure that people can get from A to B on the trains that they rely on every day. But we need Sydney and New South Wales Trains and the New South Wales government to step up their efforts too, to ensure that the trains continue to operate as people need them to.